The day I asked my daughter for help, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Figure it out yourself, Mom." But what she didn't know was that I had already signed the deed to my brand new house. And what I did next changed everything between us forever. Hello there, beautiful souls. My name is Carol, and I'm 71 years old. Before I share what happened to me, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or state in the comments below. I always love connecting with wonderful people from all over this beautiful country of ours. Now, what I'm about to tell you happened just 6 months ago, and it still gives me chills when I think about it. It's a story about the moment I realized that sometimes the people we love most can surprise us in the most hurtful ways. But it's also about discovering strength I never knew I had. Let me paint you a picture of my life before everything changed. I'd been living in the same house for 43 years, the house where my husband Frank and I raised our daughter Jessica. After Frank passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, that house became both my sanctuary and my burden. You see, it was a beautiful Victorian home with high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and a wraparound porch that Frank had restored with his own 2 hands. But it was also 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms that I didn't need, with heating bills that made my fixed income stretch thinner each month, and maintenance issues that seemed to multiply faster than I could handle them. The roof leaked during heavy rains. The old furnace coughed and wheezed through every winter. The front steps had started to sag, and the paint was peeling on the north side where the wind hit hardest. At my age, climbing a ladder to clean gutters wasn't just difficult, it was dangerous. But every time I looked around at Frank's handiwork, at the wallpaper we'd chosen together, at the height marks on the kitchen door frame where we'd measured Jessica's growth, I couldn't bear the thought of leaving. Jessica lived about 20 minutes away with her husband Mark and their 2 teenage boys, Tyler and Connor. She had a successful career as a marketing director for a pharmaceutical company, and Mark was an attorney. They lived in a sprawling suburban home with a 3-car garage and a pool in the backyard. From the outside looking in, they had everything anyone could want. But here's what I didn't fully understand until that terrible day. Jessica had been watching my struggles with the house, not with concern for my well-being, but with dollar signs in her eyes. You see, our neighborhood had been changing over the past few years. Young families were moving in, renovating the old homes, and property values were climbing steadily. My house, despite its needs, was sitting on a prime lot in what real estate agents were now calling a highly desirable historic district. Jessica knew this. She knew it very well. For months leading up to that day, she'd been dropping hints about my situation. During our weekly phone calls, she'd say things like, "Mom, you know you can't stay in that big house forever," or "Have you given any more thought to your future living arrangements?" At family dinners, she'd point out every little thing that needed fixing. The loose banister, the squeaky floorboard, the way the bathroom faucet dripped. I thought she was being caring. I thought she was worried about her aging mother living alone in a house that was becoming too much to handle. I was grateful that she was paying attention, that she cared enough to notice these things. How naive I was. The turning point came on a Thursday morning in March. I'd been dealing with a plumbing emergency. The main water line to the house had burst during a particularly harsh cold snap, flooding my basement and damaging some of Frank's old workshop equipment and several boxes of family photos that I'd stored down there. I called a plumber, but he couldn't come until the following Monday. Meanwhile, I had no water in the house. None. I couldn't shower, couldn't wash dishes, couldn't even make a cup of coffee. At 71, I wasn't exactly equipped to dig up my front yard and fix a water main myself. I'd been staying at a nearby motel for 3 nights, paying $90 a night that I really couldn't afford. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and for the first time since Frank died, I felt truly helpless. That's when I decided to swallow my pride and call Jessica. "Honey," I said when she answered, "I hate to bother you at work, but I'm in a real bind here." I explained about the water line, about the motel, about feeling lost and unsure of what to do next. I wasn't asking for money. I still had enough savings to cover the repair, though it would be tight. I wasn't even asking her to fix anything. I just needed someone to care, someone to maybe offer a guest room for a few nights, or perhaps just some emotional support during a difficult time. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Jessica sighed. Not a sympathetic sigh, but an irritated one. "Mom," she said, and I could hear the impatience in her voice. "You can't keep calling me every time something goes wrong with that house. I have my own family to worry about, my own responsibilities. I can't be your handyman or your hotel or your problem solver. You're going to have to figure it out yourself." Figure it out yourself. Those 4 words hit me like a physical blow. "But Jessica," I started to say, "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just thought maybe what? Maybe I could drop everything and come rescue you? Mom, we've talked about this. That house is too much for you. It's been too much for you for years. Instead of calling me every time there's a crisis, maybe you should be using this as motivation to finally make some adult decisions about your living situation." Adult decisions. As if 71 years of making decisions, of raising a child, of caring for a dying husband, of managing a household and a life, somehow didn't count as adult enough. "I have to go," she continued. "I'm in the middle of preparing for a big presentation. Call a hotel if you need to. Call a plumber. Call someone else. But stop calling me with these emergencies. I can't be responsible for every little thing that goes wrong in your life." And then she hung up. I sat in that dingy motel room, holding my cell phone, staring at the screen that said, "Call ended," and I felt something break inside me. Not just my heart, though that was certainly shattered. Something deeper than that. Something fundamental about who I thought my daughter was, about what I thought our relationship meant. But here's what Jessica didn't know as she sat in her corner office, preparing for her important presentation, feeling proud of herself for setting boundaries with her needy mother. 3 weeks earlier, I had done something that would have shocked her to her core. You see, while Jessica had been dropping her hints about my situation, while she'd been eyeing my property with increasing interest, while she'd been calculating the inheritance she assumed would eventually come her way, I had been doing some calculating of my own. I'd been watching the real estate market too. I'd seen what homes in my neighborhood were selling for, and I'd realized that the equity I'd built up in my house over 4 decades wasn't just going to be my daughter's nest egg someday. It could be my freedom today. So I'd done something I hadn't told anyone about. Not Jessica, not my neighbors, not even my closest friend. I'd contacted a real estate agent, got my house appraised, and started looking at smaller properties in a lovely, active senior community about an hour north of town. The community was called Sunset Manor, and it was nothing like the sterile, institutional nursing homes that Jessica had started hinting I might need to consider. These were beautiful, maintenance-free condominiums designed specifically for active seniors who wanted independence without the burden of home ownership responsibilities. Each unit was a spacious 1 or 2 bedroom condo with modern appliances, central air and heat, and access to a community center with a library, fitness facilities, organized social activities, and even transportation services for shopping and medical appointments. There was a waiting list, but when I explained my situation, they told me they expected to have a perfect unit available within the month. The best part? After selling my house and buying the condo, I would have enough money left over to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Not just comfortably, better than I'd lived in years. No more choosing between heating bills and grocery money. No more lying awake at night worrying about major repairs. No more feeling like a burden on anyone. 3 weeks before that phone call from the motel room, I had signed the purchase agreement for a beautiful 2-bedroom condo with a view of a lake and a small garden where I could grow tomatoes and flowers. The closing was scheduled for the following month. I had been planning to surprise Jessica with the news over dinner to show her that her mother was more capable and resourceful than she'd given me credit for. But after that phone call, after hearing her tell me to figure it out myself, I decided that Jessica had forfeited the right to be part of my good news. If she wanted me to figure it out myself, then that's exactly what I would do. The next morning, I checked out of the motel and drove to my friend Eleanor's house. Eleanor was my age, a widow like me, and someone who had always been generous with her spare bedroom when friends needed a place to stay. When I explained about the water line, she immediately invited me to stay as long as I needed. I didn't mention the conversation with Jessica. I didn't want Eleanor to think badly of my daughter, even though I was starting to think badly of her myself. The plumber came that Monday and fixed the water line. The bill was $850, money I could afford to pay, though it stung. As he worked, he looked around my basement and shook his head. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you've got some other issues down here that are going to need attention soon. That old water heater is on its last legs, and I can see some signs that you might have foundation settling that could cause problems down the line. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just concerned about an older lady living alone with these kinds of potential issues." I thanked him for his honesty and paid his bill. Then I went upstairs and called my real estate agent. "How quickly can we expedite the closing?" I asked. She managed to move everything up by 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, I quietly started packing. I sorted through 43 years of accumulated belongings, deciding what to take to my new life and what to donate or throw away. It was harder than I'd expected, but also liberating. Each box I packed felt like a step toward freedom. Jessica called once during this time, but it wasn't to apologize or check on how I was managing after the waterline crisis. It was to invite me to Tyler's baseball game that weekend. "If you're free," she said, as if I might have a packed social calendar. I went to the game. I cheered for my grandson, hugged him afterward, and acted like everything was normal. Jessica chatted about work, about Mark's latest case, about Connor's grades. She never once asked how I was doing or whether I'd managed to figure it out like she told me to do. As I watched her that day, I realized something that made me profoundly sad. Jessica had become someone I didn't recognize, the little girl who used to bring me dandelions and call them beautiful flowers, who used to cry if she accidentally stepped on an ant, who used to tell me I was the best mommy in the world. That little girl had grown into a woman who could dismiss her mother's desperate call for help without a second thought. When had she become so cold? When had she started seeing me as an obligation rather than the person who had loved her unconditionally for 38 years? I didn't have answers to those questions, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done trying to earn back the daughter I used to know. It was time to focus on the life I could still build for myself. The closing on my new condo was scheduled for a Friday morning. The day before, I hired a moving company to come pack up my remaining belongings. I'd already donated most of Frank's tools to a local vocational school, given bags of clothes to a women's shelter, and sold several pieces of furniture that wouldn't fit in my new place. That Thursday evening, I stood in my empty living room, looking around at the bare walls and the indentations in the carpet where furniture had sat for decades. I should have felt sad, I suppose. This was the house where I'd been happiest, where I'd built a life with the love of my life, where I'd raised the child I'd thought was the greatest gift I could ever receive. But instead, I felt excited. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like I had a future to look forward to instead of just a past to cling to. That night, I called Jessica. "Hi, honey," I said when she answered. "Do you have a minute to talk?" "Sure, Mom. What's up?" "Well, I wanted to let you know that tomorrow morning I'm closing on the sale of the house." There was silence on the other end. Complete silence. For so long that I thought the call might have dropped. "Mom?" she finally said, and her voice sounded strange. "What do you mean you're selling the house?" "I mean exactly what I said, Jessica. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock, I'm meeting with the buyers and their attorney to sign the final paperwork. The house will officially belong to them as of noon on Friday." But you can't sell the house. You didn't even tell me you were thinking about selling it. You can't just make a decision like that without discussing it with family." The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. I couldn't make a decision like that without discussing it with family. Where was this concern for family discussion when she'd told me to figure out my own problems? Actually, Jessica, I can make any decision I want about my own property, and I have. Where are you going to live? Please tell me you haven't done something foolish like falling for one of those retirement home scams. Those subscription requests can be powerful. Let me add, one at this intense moment where the daughter realizes she's losing control. And right here, beautiful people, if you're enjoying this story and you want to hear how this all unfolds, would you mind hitting that subscribe button? It really helps me bring you more stories like this one. Thank you so much. I've purchased a lovely condominium in a senior community called Sunset Manor, I said calmly. It's about an hour north of here, near the lake. I'll have my own place, but without any of the maintenance responsibilities. There's a community center with activities and a library, and I'll have neighbors my own age who actually want to spend time together. An hour north? Mom, that's too far away. What if something happens to you? What if you have an emergency? Now she was concerned about emergencies. How convenient. Well, Jessica, I said, and I made sure my voice was perfectly pleasant. I guess I'll just have to figure it out myself. The silence this time was even longer. Mom, she said finally, and now I could hear panic creeping into her voice. We need to talk about this. This is a huge decision. You can't just... what about the family history in that house? What about all the memories? What about Dad's workshop? What about the inheritance she'd been counting on, is what she really meant. The memories will come with me, I said. As for Dad's workshop, I donated his tools to the Lincoln County Vocational School. There are young people there learning skilled trades who will put them to good use. I think Frank would have liked that. You donated Dad's tools? Mom, some of those were antiques. They were probably worth thousands of dollars. And what about discussing this with me first? I could have helped you figure out what was valuable, what should be kept in the family. Kept in the family, meaning kept for her to inherit. Jessica, I said, and now my voice wasn't quite so pleasant anymore. 3 weeks ago, when my water line burst and I had no place to stay and no idea how to handle the crisis, I called you looking for help. Not money, not solutions. Just someone who cared enough to offer support during a difficult time. Do you remember what you told me? Mom, that's not fair. I was having a really stressful day at work, and you told me to figure it out myself. You told me you couldn't be responsible for every little thing that went wrong in my life. You told me I needed to make adult decisions about my living situation. I didn't mean... So that's exactly what I did. I figured it out myself. I made an adult decision about my living situation. I solved my own problems without bothering you. Isn't this exactly what you wanted? That's not what I meant, and you know it. No, Jessica, I don't know it. Because when your 71-year-old mother called you in distress, you couldn't be bothered to offer even basic emotional support, so I learned to stop expecting it from you. I could hear her starting to cry now, and part of me, the mother part that had comforted her through scraped knees and broken hearts and teenage disappointments, wanted to soften my tone, to apologize, to make it better. But the woman who had spent 3 nights in a dingy motel room, feeling abandoned and unloved, wasn't ready to make it better. When do you close on the new place? She asked. Tomorrow morning, same time as the sale closing. I'll move in this weekend. Can I see it? Can we talk about this more? Of course you can see it, I said. It's a lovely place. I think you'll be impressed with how well I've figured things out for myself. The next morning, I dressed in my best suit, a navy blue outfit that Frank had always said made me look distinguished, and drove to the law office where both closings would take place. The buyers were a young couple with 2 small children who had fallen in love with the house's character and were excited about the prospect of restoration. The husband was a carpenter, and his eyes had lit up when he saw Frank's craftsmanship. We promised to take good care of it, the wife had told me when we'd first met. We can see how much love went into this house. Signing those papers should have been heartbreaking. Watching strangers take legal ownership of the place where I'd spent most of my adult life should have felt like losing everything that mattered. Instead, as I signed my name for the final time, I felt like I was signing my independence. An hour later, I was signing different papers at a different table, officially becoming the owner of a beautiful lakeside condominium where I could start fresh at 71 years old. I spent that weekend moving in, arranging my furniture, hanging pictures, and setting up my new life. Eleanor came to help, and so did a few other friends from church. We worked together, laughed together, and by Sunday evening, my new place felt like home. Jessica didn't come to help. She didn't even call. It was Tuesday when she finally showed up. I was sitting on my small patio, watching the sunset over the lake and reading a book, when I heard a car in the driveway. I looked up to see Jessica walking toward me, and the expression on her face was one I'd never seen before. It was somewhere between devastated and furious. "Hi, honey," I said, setting down my book. "This is a nice surprise. Would you like some iced tea?" She sat down in the chair across from me without saying anything for a long moment. Then she looked around at the patio, at the view of the lake, at the well-maintained grounds of the community visible through the trees. "It's nice," she said finally, and she sounded surprised. "Thank you. I think so, too." "Mom," she said, and now she leaned forward, her voice urgent. "We need to talk about what you've done." "What I've done? You mean what I've done about figuring out my own problems and making adult decisions about my living situation?" She winced. "I know you're angry about what I said, but I'm not angry, Jessica. Anger implies that I still have expectations that can be disappointed. I've moved beyond that." "What does that mean?" I looked at my daughter, this woman who looked so much like me at her age, who had my eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and I tried to figure out how to explain what I'd learned about both of us over the past month. "It means that for the first time in 5 years, I'm not spending my days worrying about being a burden on you. I'm not lying awake at night wondering if the next crisis will be the one that finally exhausts your patience completely. I'm not constantly grateful for scraps of attention or afraid to ask for help when I need it." "Mom, I never said you were a burden." "You didn't have to say it. It was clear in every sigh when I called, every suggestion that I should consider other options, every time you pointed out something else that was wrong with the house. You saw me as a problem to be managed, not a person to be loved." Her face crumpled. "That's not true." "Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked about my day, my thoughts, my feelings about anything other than my housing situation? When was the last time you treated me like someone whose company you actually enjoyed?" She opened her mouth to answer, and then closed it again, because we both knew the answer was that it had been a very long time. "I thought," she said finally, tears starting to flow, "I thought I was being practical. I thought I was helping you face reality." "No, Jessica. You were helping me face your reality. Your reality where I was becoming inconvenient, where my problems were interfering with your life, where the house you expected to inherit was costing more to maintain than you thought it was worth. That's not... I wasn't thinking about inheritance." I looked at her steadily until she looked away. "The house sold for $475,000, I said quietly. "After paying off the small mortgage balance and closing costs, I cleared over $400,000. Combined with your father's life insurance and our savings, I now have more than enough money to live independently and comfortably for the rest of my life." Her face went white. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you," I continued. "I'm telling you this so you understand that I don't need you to take care of me anymore. I don't need you to manage my problems or make my decisions or worry about my finances. I figured it out myself, just like you told me to do." "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about what I said that day. I was stressed and I wasn't thinking clearly and you showed me who you really are when you're under stress. That's not necessarily a bad thing, Jessica. People reveal their true priorities when they're pressured. You've shown me that I'm not one of your priorities, and that's okay. It's good for me to know where I stand." She was crying harder now. "But I love you. You're my mother. Of course you're a priority. Love isn't just a feeling, sweetheart. It's a choice we make about how to treat people. And when I needed you to choose love, you chose convenience instead. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun sink lower over the water. Finally, Jessica spoke again. What happens now? Between us, I mean. I considered the question seriously. What did happen now? I don't know, I said honestly. I know that I'm not angry anymore. I know that I don't want to punish you or make you feel terrible for the rest of your life. But I also know that I can't go back to the way things were, where I was always grateful for whatever attention you were willing to give me. I want to do better, she said. I want to be a better daughter. Then be one. Not because you feel guilty, and not because you're worried about what people will think, and not because you're concerned about some future inheritance that no longer exists the way you thought it did. Be a better daughter because you genuinely want a relationship with the person I actually am, not the person you thought I should be. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Can I visit you again? Can we try to start over? You can visit any time you want, I said. But understand that this is my home now. I'm not a problem to be solved anymore. I'm not someone who needs to be managed or guided toward better decisions. I'm a woman who has built a good life for herself. And if you want to be part of that life, you're welcome. But only if you want to be here, not because you think you should be. Jessica stayed for dinner that night. We talked more honestly than we had in years, and for the first time since Frank died, I saw glimpses of the daughter I remembered, the one who used to tell me everything, who used to think I was wise and funny and worth spending time with. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But it was a beginning. More importantly, it was my beginning. At 71 years old, I had learned that I didn't need anyone's permission to make my own decisions, solve my own problems, or build my own happiness. I had figured it out myself, and it turned out I was much more capable than anyone, including me, had given me credit for. That was 6 months ago. Since then, Jessica and I have slowly been rebuilding our relationship, but on different terms than before. She visits every few weeks, not because she feels obligated to check on her helpless mother, but because we actually enjoy each other's company again. She's started asking my advice about things, work situations, parenting challenges with the boys. And I realized that somewhere along the way, she had forgotten that I'm actually pretty good at figuring things out. As for me, I love my new life. I've made friends in the community, joined a book club, started taking watercolor painting classes, and even learned to play bridge. Last month, I took a weekend trip to visit Eleanor's sister in Colorado, and next spring, I'm planning to take a river cruise through Europe, something Frank and I always talked about doing but never got around to. The best part is that every decision I make now is mine alone. I don't have to worry about being a burden, because I'm not one. I don't have to ask permission or approval, because this is my life to live. Sometimes people ask me if I regret selling the family home, if I miss it. The truth is, I miss the memories that house held, but memories aren't tied to buildings. They're carried in our hearts. And my heart is much lighter these days. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, whether you're the mother who's been made to feel like a burden, or maybe even the daughter who's been too busy to really see your parent as a whole person, I hope you'll take something valuable from what happened to me. We're all capable of more than people give us credit for. We're all worth more than being someone else's obligation, and it's never too late to figure it out for yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminded you that every ending can also be a beginning, if we're brave enough to write a new chapter. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, you're stronger than you know.